In this video, I'm going to discuss organic molecules. Organic molecules are molecules that are found in living organisms, and they're incredibly important. So organic molecules contain carbon and hydrogen atoms. They also often contain nitrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus, and other atoms also. But those are the principal ones you may find in many organic molecules. The name organic actually comes from an outdated idea that all organic molecules are created only by living organisms. We know now that it's possible to synthesize organic molecules in a lab. Also, there are naturally occurring phenomena that lead to the generation of organic molecules. So it's certainly not required that all organic molecules come from life, but that's the origin of the term. So when you hear organic, it has nothing to do with organic food or anything like that. It just means a molecule that contains carbon and hydrogen and perhaps some of these other atoms. Now, there are four types of organic molecules that we're going to be talking a lot about in this course, and they're found in all organisms. First of all, there are proteins. These are going to be large molecules are made of amino acids, and there's actually a picture of an amino acid here. You can see that, as I just mentioned, it's going to have carbon as the backbone. And then you can see quite a few hydrogen atoms, and there's actually some oxygen and nitrogen also within this amino acid. And as we'll see in other, we'll talk about in other videos, the fact that proteins are made up essentially of chains of many amino acids linked together. Another really major class of organic molecules is lipids. Lipids are going to be non-polar molecules, and we'll talk about their properties. They often have hydrocarbon chains, and there's actually a picture here of a hydrocarbon chain. So hydro refers to hydrogen, and carbon, of course, is carbon. So a hydrocarbon chain has a backbone of carbon with many hydrogens attached. We'll also talk about carbohydrates and nucleic acids. So let's talk about, before we delve into all those different molecules, which we'll do in other videos, let's talk about why carbon is so special. So carbon is special because it can form covalent bonds with itself and with other atoms in ways that are more varied than almost any other atom out there in the universe. Let's see why this is the case. Carbon has 6 electrons, 2 in its inner electron shell, and 4 in its outer electron shell. So it has 4 valence electrons. Now, recall that the outer electron shell is most stable when it's filled with 8 electrons. Carbon has 4, so this means that carbon can form 4 single covalent bonds with other atoms. And an example of this is shown here. We have methane, in which you have carbon with single covalent bonds with 4 different hydrogen atoms. And let's see why this would be the case. Let's go back a second and just discuss this a little bit. So we've got carbon. If we look at the periodic table, we see that it has an atomic number of 6, meaning it has 6 protons. To be electrically neutral, it should have 6 electrons. So then if we look at the diagram that I made here, we can see there are 2 electrons in the inner shell, 4 electrons in the outer shell. Now it needs essentially 4 more electrons. And one way of doing that is to combine with hydrogen. Recall that hydrogen has a single proton in its nucleus and a single electron in its outermost shell. But for hydrogen, hydrogen is more stable if it has 2 electrons in it only has 1 shell, but its outermost shell. And so this makes it natural for carbon and hydrogen to potentially combine and form covalent bonds. And in this case, again, we can see it's methane that is the resulting molecule. Methane is an important molecule. It's made both by organic and inorganic means. It's actually a contributor to global warming. It's a greenhouse gas. So carbon, not only can carbon form single covalent bonds, but it can also form double covalent bonds with other carbon atoms and with oxygen and potentially other atoms. So you can see an example of this. Here's an amino acid, phenylalanine. You can see there's double bonds between carbon and other carbon atoms, and there's actually a double bond here between carbon and oxygen. And of course, it's possible for carbon to also form double bonds with yet other atoms. So the main point here is that carbon's very flexible. It can make single bonds, it can make double bonds very easily. And this makes it possible to make very large molecules. So carbon will form the backbone of these very large molecules. And so these are the sorts of molecules that are found within your body. So carbon can form very large molecules, and we have a special name for them. They're called macromolecules. So macro simply means big. So these are big molecules. A macromolecule is often a polymer, which is a molecule that is made up of many subunits. And a subunit is called a monomer. Okay, so those are terms we're going to use a lot. Monomer is a subunit, and a polymer is when you put those monomers together to make a much bigger molecule. And an example of this is shown here. We can see a chain of amino acids, one after another, bound together covalently. And a chain of amino acids is actually called a polypeptide, and that's something we're going to get into in future videos. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to look at how macromolecules are synthesized and how they're broken down. Thanks for watching.